Hi guys, this is SDJRSNF88 speaking with a quick tutorial on how to prepare a live steam locomotive for running on your garden railway. Now this is only a rough guideline as each live steam locomotive is different and may require its own unique way of being prepared for steaming. But for the purpose of this video we are using an Accucraft Caradoc, which is a very standard live steam locomotive, easy to prepare and easy to use. So it's a good base or a good starting point for those of you who want to get into live steam. Now before we get started we need a few things. The first is some dehumidified water. We also need some light multi-purpose oil for lubrication, some gas, preferably a butane mix or butane propane mix, some steam oil, a syringe for getting the water into the boiler, and of course a lighter. Now two other things I also recommend is a block of wood to rest the engine on so it's easy to turn around to get to all the little points on the engine. And also a soft surface, i.e. an old towel or a sponge like this, so you can roll the engine over and get to the underside and basically lubricate the mechanism on the bottom. So that's all for all the bits you need. So without further ado, let's get started on preparing this locomotive for a running session. So the first and most crucial step of preparing your live steam locomotive for running is of course lubrication. So what you will need is your multi-purpose oil, and basically you've got to go around the whole locomotive on all of the operating parts, i.e. the linkage, the bearings and anything that basically moves or rubs against each other when running, and basically give it a little splash of oil so it all runs nice and smoothly and doesn't dry out. Now, you don't want to be too sparing with the oil, but at the same time you do not want too much oil on there, as over-oiling the locomotive can also do as much damage as under-oiling the locomotive. If you're running a garden railway like mine, where the locomotive is at ground level, over-oiling could attract dirt, and basically it will stick to the oil and basically get sort of sucked into all the little bearings and basically be a bit like rubbing sandpaper up against all the little bits and pieces in there, which will basically shorten the life of all the little components on the engine. So over-oiling is not wise. So I've got this multi-purpose light engine oil, and all you just do is you just simply just put a little drop on each little bit that moves, so like the part of the linkage here and the little bearing there, and basically you go around the whole locomotive. So as you can see, the block of wood comes in handy here, so you could turn the engine around to the other side and just basically just repeat on everything that moves, and try not to over oil it. Of course, if you do add too much oil at some point and too much comes out the can, just get a little tiny bit of a towel or something and just dab a bit off. Again, just be careful not to get any fibres in there. So you basically just do this around the whole locomotive, making sure that everything is oiled, and including the underside. So this is where your soft surface will also come in handy. So you can roll the locomotive over, as you will see in a moment, and oil the crucial mechanism on the underside of the locomotive as well. Once the engine has been fully lubricated, we can then move on to the next step, which is priming the locomotive ready for steaming. Now for this you will need WOG, or water, oil, gas. Now you can put these in any which way you prefer, though I prefer to do it in the way that I've just mentioned, which is water in first, then the oil, and gas last. Reason for this is the water is the most important ingredient in preparing a live steam locomotive, and at no point do you want the water to run out, as this could cause critical damage to the locomotive if you start firing the engine without any water, or the engine runs out of water at any point. So I always put the water in first, just to be on the safe side, so in case if anything happens and I need to go off anywhere, while I'm priming the engine, I know that there's water in the tank in case I forget to top it up. So for putting the water in, what you do is you simply unscrew this little valve here, and this basically is the filler cap for the boiler. Now on each engine it is different, it can be located in a different area, but on the Caradoc it's located there. Now for this we are using condensated or dehumidified water. Now dehumidified water is of course from a dehumidifier. Now the reason for this is because the dehumidifier removes all of the minerals and impurities from the water. So if you've got a dehumidifier at home, electric dehumidifier, or a dehumidifying washing machine, tumble dryer, collect the water from that, put it into old milk jugs like this, and basically you've got a sort of a water supply for your locomotive. Now the reason for not using normal water from your tap is it can have impurities in it and minerals like limescale. And of course, a bit like a kettle, the more and more you use this, the more and more the impurities will build up on the inside the boiler. And of course this will shorten the running life of your locomotive, and eventually it will clog up your boiler, which will basically mean your locomotive will no longer operate or will be able to operate. So it's always best to use condensated or dehumidified water. So basically you just keep on pumping this in until you get to the top, and we should get to the top when the water starts overflowing from the little filler that on top there, which normally is after about 3 syringes. There we go. And once that's been topped up, always put your leftover water in your syringe back in the bottle, because that could always be used next time. Now once it's full, you just take a little tiny bit off the top. I take about 10 ml off. This gives a bit of space in the boiler, which will allow pressure to build up and steam to sort of collect in the boiler and start building up pressure. So once that's done, you put your cap back on, and we're now ready to move on to the next step. So now we are going to add the steam oil to the locomotive, and the first thing you need to do is open up this little valve on the bottom here, just there, and basically you do this by twisting it clockwise there, and basically you just fully open this little valve and you basically just let any excess water drip out. Now sometimes there could be quite a lot in here, sometimes there could be next to nothing. It depends basically when you last steamed the locomotive and how much is left. And basically you just want to wait until any sort of water comes out and you start getting oil. So as you can see, no water has come out, but we've actually got steam oil that's just come out. So that means it's clear. So now we can close that up there. Just make it finger tight. Don't want to do it over tighten it. So there we go. Just finger tight there. Move that out of the way. And now we simply unscrew this little thing on here. Sometimes it's pretty tight, depends on, there we go. Sometimes it does stick. There we go. Just simply unscrew that there, and this will basically is the little cap for the oil reservoir. Now for this you need steam oil, and at no point should you use any other type of oil, so no motor oil, nothing like that, as that will also ruin your steam locomotive. So for this you could use any sort of Accucraft steam oil, or any other manufacturer's steam oil. In this case we are using Roundhouse oil. Now you get different thicknesses. This is thick steam oil. Reason for using this is it's all I've got left, but normally you could use a sort of a medium thickness steam oil on this and it'll work perfectly fine. But for the purpose of this tutorial I'm going to use some thick steam oil. And what you just do is you simply just pop the cap in the reservoir and you just simply fill it to the top. And just let it in there. Now this does take a bit of time. Sometimes there's a little airlock in there and requires a little bit of a twiddling around and sort of moving the engine about to get a little air bubble out, and then you just simply pop a bit more in. But once you've got the oil up to the top, just enough so you don't overflow it when tightening up the cap back on it, you're pretty much ready to go. So once you've added the oil to the locomotive, we can move on to the third and final step, which is of course adding the gas. Now you can either use a butane or a butane propane mix. Now during warmer weather I recommend using a butane mix as it burns slightly cooler than a butane propane mix, which burns a lot hotter. Now that is much better for use in winter as it brings the engine up to temperature quicker, but in the summer when it's quite warm outside, the engine's been sitting around in the sun, it's always best to use a butane mix like this. So what you do is you've got to make sure you've got your little valve on the end. So this is a special little valve that adapts to the fixture on the locomotive there. And basically what you do is you make sure it's nice and tight, and also you make sure your gas is off first, so that's on there. So if I just tighten it off so it is off, and then basically you just press the two together, and you should start hearing the tank fill. Now when it starts squirting out the side of the valve, which we'll see in a moment, there we go, it means that your tank is now full. Now it's always best to leave the engine for a bit just to let the gas settle. As you saw, there was quite a lot of condensation there from where the gas started hitting all the cool parts, and of course that will end up in the tank. So just let the engine sit a bit, and then open the valve gently and just let a little bit of gas out. So here we are over at the railway, and we are almost nearly ready to light the burner. There's a few things to do though beforehand, the first of which is to open up the blowdown. Now this could be on a different number of locations on your locomotive depending which model you have. On this Caradoc, however, it's actually the whistle. So if I open up, pull this little lever down here, which operates the whistle, and that should open the blowdown valve. And basically this will let any sort of water drip out of the pipes down there. And when steam starts to emit, basically you are pretty much ready to go. Another little feature that this Caradoc has, which is sort of an added extra, most live steam locomotives don't have this, but it's a great help if they do, is cylinder drain cocks. And as you can see, I'm just going to open them on the front, and this will let any condensation in the cylinders out, which will hopefully mean the engine should run smoother when she's good to go. Now this locomotive runs on a system of water to gas, so the gas runs out before the water, which is of course what you want with a live steam locomotive. If it happens the other way, it can cause serious damage to your boiler, as mentioned earlier on. But what I've noticed over the past few months running this locomotive on my railway, the running out time of the water is pretty much very close to the running out time of the gas. So to stop this from happening, I always let a little bit of extra gas out. So without further ado, if I open up the smoke box, which is where you light the locomotive, I'll just turn the gas valve one more time and just let a few seconds of gas out. As you can see, there's a bit of condensation in there, with a little cloud just came out there, a bit of gurgling, so there's a bit of condensation in there. There we go, nice steady flow now, and I'll just shut the valve. And now what you got to do is make sure you waft away the gas from the locomotive. Of course, if you light the locomotive now while there's a lot of gas in the air, you will get a huge great flash of flame, and of course you'll probably lose half the hair on the back of your hand, which is not a good thing, and you can get quite serious burns from this. So if you just let the engine sit for a bit, let the engine just waft the gas away, and let the wind carry it away as well, and hopefully you'll be good to go. Now of course you've got your trusty lighter, so there we go. And for this you just turn on the gas, and remember, turn on the gas quickly, don't leave it running, as again you will get the same effect. So if I just turn it on, and there you go, and you can now hear there's a hissing going on in there, which is of course the flame in the burner. Now for this I'm just going to turn the gas up a bit more, get a bit of a roar going. Now you don't want the flame too vigorous, you don't want the flame to be basically in the smoke box there. So if I just close the door there, just let the engine just sit there and let it till it gets a nice calm roar on the go, and basically just leave it to build up pressure. course, while the engine is building up pressure, there's a few more things we could do. The first of which is switch on a power supply to the servos, as this Caradoc is fitted with radio control. So while the engine's just sitting there, just test that everything's working. So that's the reverser there. That works nicely. I just put that into neutral. And of course you've got the regulator there as well. So just to make sure the blowdown just stays down there as well. Now there's a pressure gauge on there just inside the cab, and when the engine reaches 40, 50 sort of PSI and the sort of the safety valve lifts, you're pretty much good to go. You can see we're getting a little bit of steam and quite a bit of water out from underneath the locomotive now, which is a good sign. So the engine's started to build up temperature, so hopefully in a few minutes we'll be ready to go. So as you can now see, we're getting quite a bit of steam from the blowdown valve. So if I just close the blowdown itself, and you can see there's steam starting to come out the safety valve now. So we are pretty much good to go. So if I just knock the gas back a bit, just so you get a nice gentle roar there, you can just about hear it there. If I just grab the controller a moment, we shall see if she'll move, and there we go. Just got to rock the engine back and forth a bit. She may need a little bit of help just to clear the cylinders, just to get that excess water out of the cylinders there. Just a little rocket back and forth. Sorry, it's off screen now. There we go. And as you can hear, she's off.